Welcome to the Season 3 Ward's Way podcast, where we're covering the hot legislative topics of 2025. From tariffs to tunnels and bridges. From forward trade zones to workers' compensation. To the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show. To the Marine Research Hub. Industry experts and clarification on the B1, B2 visas. Join us as we celebrate 75 years in business, and we're just getting started. So I'm sitting here today with Phil Purcell, President and CEO of the Marine Industries Association of South Florida. Boy, that's a lot to get out in one whole breath.
Yeah.
That is a big. But one of the things that I think the Marine Industries Association of South Florida doesn't get enough credit for is all the activities that you're involved with, both yourself and the staff involved with, in all of these unintended consequences against our industry, so to speak. And not that anything is being levied against us, or that it's the city against the industry or the county against the industry, but we are an industry that's living in a very thriving metropolitan area, and there have to be consequences to that we all need to live together. So one of the top issues that we've talked about is the train and the tunnel. Talk to me about that and
Sure.
and how that's come about. And
So, bridge tunnel. And so think of it this way, because you brought up like economics and size and metropolitan areas.
Yep.
So when you think of that, we're the third largest state in the nation, sixth largest metropolitan area. And it goes something like Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Dallas, Houston, and then us, South Florida, Palm Beach, Miami, and Dade.
the whole Tri-County.
Yeah, the whole Tri-County area. And so we're the sixth largest metropolitan area. We have one way in, one way out, basically, right? I-95.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, a rail corridor on the FEC and stuff. And so Henry Flagler back in 1895 started bringing a railroad down. By the time 1912 hit, Henry Flagler was all the way down to Key West.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty interesting, right? And so he had commuter different things going on, and obviously helped grow South Florida. So this has been on the people's minds since the 80s when Amtrak was trying to do something here, and they wanted to do it on the FEC corridor. They ended up doing it on the CSX corridor, which then again in the 90s is when Tri-Rail came in.
So to explain to people, you just said the
FEC.
the
So
FEC
corridor's
corridor.
east, and that's what runs through all the major cities: Palm Beach,
Downtown.
Jacksonville, downtowns, all the downtowns. And then the CSX corridor runs, about 10 miles to the west along I-95,
Right.
which
Okay.
is wonderful. However, that's not your urban centers. 20 years ago,
Sure.
it was a little bit better, right? There was nothing. But now your urban centers, you look at the development that's taken place in Palm Beach and in all the Broward counties and then in Dade County, it makes perfect sense to activate this corridor. And so they came up with a plan. And in that plan, when they did it, I was not in this role at the time, but I was involved in the industry. And so we know when we retrofitted our yard up the river, we knew about the bridge that was here, the CSX or the FEC bridge and the CSX bridge. And it was not a threat to us. Usually it was in a default position. A freight train would go by and things like that.
And this is going back how many years? Just maybe 10 years?
Yeah, is 2013, 2014,
Okay.
in
So
terms
we're about
of when
10
the
years ago where
activation.
we're talking. Okay.
And it wasn't really a threat to anyone. Every once in a while something would break. No different than
Sure.
if a boat breaks. It's mechanical, it's going to fail. But they'd get it fixed, and we didn't have a lot of unintended consequences. When they bought Brightline on board and stuff, which was great, at the end of the day, you need to figure out solutions. Our industry, was like, get rid of that damn bridge, make it go away. They weren't exactly cooperative.
And
Let's put it
why?
that
Why
way.
would our industry want to do that? Now, I will say, from a practical standpoint, aren't most of our yards upriver
100%.
from that bridge? So
100%, but you got to go back to where we live. And so we live in the sixth largest metropolitan area in the country. And so what we need was infrastructure, because
Yep.
all we had to do is look west for the solutions. I-95 crosses our river. Do we ever talk about it?
Nope.
Because it's 55 feet. Do we talk about Tri-Rail going over the river? Nope, because it's 55 feet. Do we even talk about the CSX bridge, which is right at Marina Bay and stuff?
No.
No, we really don't talk about that, because guess what? Even when they repaired that bridge or put a new bridge in, they did it over a 7-day period. They notified us. We planned or worked around
Right.
it, and it worked. All of a sudden, Brightline comes in, and unfortunately, the messaging was wrong from Brightline, probably. The message was wrong from electeds, and the messaging was, and a lot of it, there wasn't a lot of awareness, at the end of the day. Everyone was kind of, rah, we're going to have this happen and this, and no one was paying for it except a private company at the end of the day, Brightline.
Sure.
They had a vision, and a good vision at the end of the day. But I don't think everyone took in all the unintended consequences and then the infrastructure that we really needed to make sure that our industry survived, but not just our industry, but the communities that we all live in
Correct.
and play in and work in. And so that, I think, now everyone fully understands. And so when you look at all the east-west corridors, just start with State Road 84, then move up to Broward Boulevard. That's the front door to Broward County, Broward Boulevard,
Sure.
right? You drive in, you see all these beautiful buildings. The skyline didn't even exist. The back door or the front door for our industry is Port Everglades at the end of the day, right? You come in, you go
Sure.
under 17th Street and then up the river. That's our front door. And what makes this community vibrant is our industry at the end of the day. When people get together and developers have plans, no disrespect, but they don't go sit out on 441 at a diner
No.
and plan, this is the vision I have for Fort Lauderdale. They go over to Pier 66 or Bahia Mar or some waterfront location and say, if you move your company here, if you do this, this is what you can have. And the backdrop subconsciously is our industry every day. And so there's no charge for that. If anything, we're a tax benefit. You know, we're a contributor at the end of the day. We're positive. So you go back to the FEC and the corridor and stuff. So again, our industry was opposed to it. And I was accused, actually, when I stepped into this role, I quite honestly didn't ask enough questions, Christy, and you were involved in the board at that time. I should have asked more questions. One of which, you know, what do you have pending other than we had some problems with the promoter at the time and the show, but I didn't understand the train scenario. And the train scenario was one that people are passionate about. Either you're for it or you're totally against it. Our industry at the time was against it from a business perspective, not taking into consideration the infrastructure that had been built to the west of them or before them as you go up the river that we had no problems with whatsoever. So we needed new infrastructure. So we need to start advocating for that as we went forward. And that's what we've been doing since, which is, you know, one, we have to identify the problem. Two, you got to get, you know, whoever's in that elected seat for those 2 years or whatever many years it is, have to sit with them and come up with solutions for them. And sometimes they don't have the solutions. So
why is the railroad bridge a problem? Not to interrupt, but why? Let's tell everybody, why is it a problem?
So here's
we know.
Yeah, here's the interesting thing. So what it's just like the navigability of the river. We can solve those things with our relationship with the Coast Guard. They're the ones that enforce. You look at the Miami River, it is a true commercial river. You do not see boats parked along the river anymore for the most part. It is very clean. Boats can come and go. Now, when I say clean, when you get up the Miami River and stuff, however, you still have a very commercial aspect in terms of different freighters and stuff that pop in there. But overall, they're not as vibrant anymore either. You know, you've got Jones Boat Yard and RMK and stuff where, you know, look how many yards we have up the river here. And the nice thing is we work together. We help RMK out. We help Jones Boat Yard or whoever else needs help in Miami or in Palm Beach to find solutions to their problems. We've done the same thing here. But I think the electeds at the time, everyone was excited and, you know, everyone likes a good ribbon cutting and you show up and the train comes through and you go for a ride. But we needed the infrastructure and it wasn't just the bridge, whether it's a bridge or a tunnel. And so actually the current mayor came up with the idea of a tunnel. Great idea, fantastic idea. There's tunnels all over the world. So we know that the Miami tunnel, we were just through it last week for the Coast Guard changing of the command down there. And that was nice. And we went through the Miami tunnel. It's a wonderful thing. But it was contracted and built over a decade ago. So to use costs of what something cost over a decade ago, you know, it's you can't do that. You know, well, I bought a boat 12 years ago and it cost me $10. Well, now it's $25 probably, you know. So you can't, I used to buy fuel for 25 cents. It's irrelevant. What's today going to cost? So a tunnel, we know from an engineering perspective, it can happen without question, right? And there's some give and take there in terms of what someone has to reclaim in land and things like that. With the bridge, you know, you have a 100-foot corridor basically that the FEC owns. And there's probably a little bit of give and take. We're told that there's not as much take with the bridge. Regardless, there's give and take. But since, you know, the last 10 years, all of a sudden the corridor around the FEC has been built up with condos and rentals and things like that. And what you have to keep in mind when we think of Broward County, we have Hollywood down there. You've got Wilton Manors. You've got Oakland Park. And as you continue to go north, those people count on decisions too. Palm Beach counts on a decision for our new river. So does Miami count on this decision, you know? And so we need to come up with a solution that's economically viable at the end of the day. You just can't spend money, you know. We're seeing this on the federal level right now. We have to be accountable to what the dollars are spending. These are your tax dollars, my tax dollars, and our kids' future at the end of the day. And so if your kid says, hey, I need to get to school, well, you've got a bus that the school picks you up with, right? Or I could buy you a car and whatever it is, a nice safe car with airbags and it's got a good, you know, safety rating. or you could probably buy them, a Rolls Royce. But does a Rolls Royce need to get to school? No, you can accomplish it with some other vehicle. And it's the same here. There's a tunnel and there's a bridge. What we first proposed, because again, you look at 55 feet up the river, we proposed something more solution-oriented. That's a bascule bridge that would open because we have power lines and stuff and sailboats and the power lines that are 80 feet. So we, again, tried to accommodate everyone. A 56-foot bridge. We also had an 80-foot bridge in there also. Then that would never open. You don't have to make it bascule. It comes in, at 80 feet and would be an amazing view of the city at the end of the day. But a lot of people took exception to it. Actually, some people actually were calling it, based on the previous administration, they were calling it racist. I don't think a bridge is racist at the end of the day, nor do I think I-95 is racist. Do I think it's built in urban areas? Yeah, all across this country, 100%. But that was part of the cost of getting mass infrastructure and mass transportation happening. But, if I ask the electeds that represent the areas close to us here where we've built houses with Habitat for Humanity in Sistrunk area and things like that, specifically ask them, would a bridge be racist? Or absolutely not. We just want our constituents to be able to get to work, whether it's north or south, for an affordable price. So Brightline comes in. They're a private company. They've raised money. And they need infrastructure at the end of the day. And so right now they do about 32 trains a day. And the FEC, when you look at freight trains and stuff, those primarily happen at night. Way back when, there was 20 plus trains a day of freight trains. There's not anymore because they're longer. Instead of being, a mile and a half long, now they're 4 miles long or 2.5 miles long. And so less trains. But it's a very important, segment of our industry, of this community of, having a port here, a port in Palm Beach, and a port in Miami. So everything that we get, the number one import to Port Everglades is fuel. The number one import is also, second import is yachts at the end of the day. So, when it comes to exports, you have clothing and other textiles. That's the number one import. We're third on the export for yachts. We'd like to get higher on that, right? Because that gets back to manufacturing and stuff. But the bridge or a tunnel is a critical thing. So a lot of people took an aspirational approach, like I used with the cars as a reference to get your kid to school, where a bus can get your kid to school also. And whether it's a 56-foot bridge or an 80-foot bridge, what we came up with was a 40-foot bridge as a compromise to not dividing a city. And with that, it'll clear 80% of our traffic at the end of the day. Keeping in mind, there's still 4 vehicular bridges on the river that average plus minus 20 feet. They're still going to open a lot more, and they open 30 plus times a day as it is for anything just because they're 20 feet. A 40-foot bridge, a lot of the 100-foot boats, a lot of my old brand, they'll clear. They have air drafts of 34 feet, 35 feet. So they'll clear. And that's a good thing. And then the tugs obviously navigate them both, up and down the river, depending on tides. So there's a solution with a 40-foot bridge. Some of the pushback initially was they came up with, the MPO and everyone came back with, let's do a 26-foot bridge. Well, so all we're doing is adding another impediment. It doesn't clear enough traffic. We already know from the vehicular traffic it goes 30 plus times a day. So 40 feet, we're still going to have to stop for the vehicular bridges and for the CSX if it were in the down position. But the nice thing about it, it'll clear 80% of the traffic. The problem was they said the grade couldn't be met. The freight will never go on that raised bridge of 40 feet. It will stay low. With a tunnel, it's the same thing. A lot of the advocates for the tunnel, people were saying, well, we could put freight down below. Never going to happen. 1, because of grade. 2, because of hazardous materials. So we have to take that off the table. And we finally did. We had the FEC on with a recently elected official and said, we'll never let freight run through a tunnel. Fact, right? Not fiction when sometimes people get in front of an audience and say, we can do this, this, and this with a tunnel. And believe me, we're all for the tunnel, but you got to get the economics of it. So we used references all the time to a tunnel that happened in Miami over a decade ago and that was contracted over a decade ago at a whole different cost structure. And it was built for under $900 million. I think it was $888 million. And it doesn't have a train going through it either. And equally important, we'll never have freight going through it. So in trying to find a workable solution, because again, we have to find solutions for infrastructure, we said, hey, what about a 40-foot bridge? 40-foot bridge landed before Broward Boulevard, and it would probably close 6th Street going south, but it'll go over the river at 40 feet, and then it'll clear 80% of our traffic. They said, 4% grade issue. Go to Miami, It goes up at a 4% grade, so we know it can do it. And around the world, it also goes up at a higher grade than 4%. So we know that they can do that with commuter rail, and that's what they came back with. The county did, actually. Good choice. So it solves the problem in terms of it's still going to cross at grade at Broward. So this gets into the east-west corridor issues. So think of it this way. You've got commercial, Oakland Park, Sunrise, Broward Boulevard, and State Route 84. They all stop. They're going to continue, even whether we have a tunnel or a bridge. Every one of those things, other than Broward, would stop for traffic. So we need to start building the infrastructure, either overpasses or underpasses at those corridors too, because whether it's a tunnel or a bridge, we have to solve everyone else. It's just not Fort Lauderdale that, is being impacted by commuter rail and freight. It's everyone. And so let's find the solutions. It's an infrastructure problem, not a which is better that we can afford. What we can afford is probably just a bridge. Let's make it the most iconic bridge that's ever been built.
I agree. And, a couple of points on that. One, I think it was Jim Noggle, former mayor and actually a former board member of the marine industries, told me how
and
at one point, and a yard owner, that's correct, that 17th Street Bridge at one point was thought to be a tunnel. And what a mistake that would have been. Had that become a tunnel, people would have missed being able to go up and over. People would miss being able to see the inlet. And it's such an iconic drive and such an iconic spot to be able to see, like you said, our front door into the yachting capital of the world. And we would have missed all of that had it been a tunnel. So sometimes.
Well, what's funny is, again, a lot of people that electeds have come back and said, well, the marine industry endorsed the 55-foot bridge on 17th Street because right now they're having problems with that bridge at rush hours and stuff. And as you know, the bridges, unless a boat's under tug, is going to stay closed between 7 and 9 a.m. and 4 and 6, which causes some backups at different things. I get it. But the industry really tries to accommodate that at the end of the day. However, the 17th Street Bridge has been opening a lot more. Well, one, you just finishing Pier 66 construction, which puts how many hundreds of workers there on a daily basis. And that, went seamlessly, the redevelopment of the convention center at the same time. So now that corridor on both sides has had a tremendous amount of construction, in addition to the redevelopment that's happening all up on the beach. And they all come across 17th Street, right? So what we were told was, hey, the industry said it was okay at 55 feet and it wouldn't open as much. That's not a true statement. The citizens made a choice. They could have had a tunnel or a bridge. They voted for a bridge, and they got the benefits of the view and everything else. With that said, we've identified actually some boats that actually are causing a lot of these openings, especially at the later time, the 4 to 6. And they have masts. And everyone, again, assumed that it was a big yacht pulling away from BMR or Pier 66 that was making those bridges open. And that's not the case. It's actually boats with masts that go out for sunset tours. So my argument is, why don't we sit with them first and talk to them thoughtfully and say, hey, is there a way to work around this?
Sure.
Because, again, the locals were trying to say, hey, we need to curb the industry and shut it down between 4 and 6 p.m. more. And that's not acceptable because the Coast Guard steps in and says, no, we got to have safe navigation. You can't sit on the other side, the south side of the 17th Street Bridge and hold a 150-foot or 200-foot boat for an hour sitting there when you've got a security zone right behind you with cruise ships coming and going, all the other things that happen that come into that port. Now we have a boat that comes in the port that's on liquid gas. So again, there's a lot of other things to take into consideration. And then, as you know, tides, whether ingoing or outgoing. So again, we're working with the locals trying to come up with a solution for that bridge, but it is not what people perceive in the industry. It's a lot of boats with masts that are opening it. So my argument is let's go sit with them first.
And so is it sitting with specific neighborhoods, sitting with specific, like you were saying, businesses, those that are kind of going out? I think it's a little bit of both, but it's an important element of the industry. You mentioned safety. One of the things that people don't seem to realize when we talk about the new river is, you just mentioned a large boat having to be able to, stay off the bridge and counteract the tides that's coming in and out of the port. Imagine over here around the bend when you're trying to head downriver, let's say, out of one of the yards, even if you're under tow, if those bridges were not able to go up or the cycle time is so long as it is with the river, with the railroad bridge, those are huge safety hazards. Talk about that. I mean, the Coast Guard's got to be supportive of modifying this bridge for that reason too.
So the Coast Guard won't weigh on the bridge.
They won't
don't weigh
in
on that. They will weigh on the navigation and the time allotted to us, and that's fine.
Okay,
that's
fair.
fine. That's fair. And so we understand that.
So it's
And
a way, and it's not a position on
100%,
on
whether
the
it's a
train.
tunnel or a bridge
Fine.
or what height bridge or
Okay.
anything else. We're going to get our fair share of time to be able to operate our businesses. That's the key.
Right.
Predictable openings, predictable times. Look, we all work on schedules at the end of the day. You know, your employees have to be there by 7:30. They leave at 4:30, whatever it may be. If you're catching a flight, you know you got to be there, although flights do run a little late. You're supposed to be there at 4:15 if it's taken off, and sometimes it doesn't. So it's the same here. We need a predictable opening on top
Correct.
of every hour and stuff. That way the tugs, people departing any of the yards, you've got, as you know, different tide heights, things like that, currents going in, going out. So we just need that predictable opening that says, okay, at 8 a.m., at 10 a.m., at 9 a.m., all these things are going to happen every day at this time. And if it doesn't happen at that time, there's got to be a consequence. You know, we pay, anytime there's a bridge failure, our industry pays. It's funny how it never breaks in the open position. It usually breaks in the down position.
Gotcha.
And so, and again, no conspiracy theory, I get it, but we need to find solutions. That's why, again, tunnel or bridge, with a tunnel, I'm all for it. It just, the economics aren't going to pencil out. So a bridge, let's get a new railroad bridge. Let's make it iconic looking. It's still going to be low, and that's going to handle the freight. And let's get a new 40-foot vehicular bridge or other bridge that can accommodate 80% of our traffic.
And what do we think about timing on any of this? I mean, it's been 10 years. Are
You
we
see my
thinking
hair?
another 10 years?
You see my hair? There'll probably be none left
Okay.
by the time it starts.
Okay. Me
But
too.
that said, yeah, it's a minimum of 10 years.
Okay.
And but we have to get going now. I mean, let's do it in today's dollars too. Let's get things bid out because it is a process. So right now, the county is a perfect example. Broward County, they've been trying to make an agreement with the city, and knowing that the other communities in Broward County want this to happen, as does Palm Beach, as does Miami. They went ahead last week and moved the North Corridor forward. That means to PD&E studies, so planning, design, and engineering.
Okay.
So they'll go ahead and start doing their, and they dedicated, I think, $20 million to do this, to go do their studies that they need to plan, design, and then engineer, and then environmental impacts and all those things. I get there's going to be some impacts. There's bigger impacts by doing nothing.
Correct.
But it should go simultaneously with the mitigation of Broward Boulevard east-west, with, you know, Sunrise east-west, commercial.
What do
Oakland
you
Park.
mean by that?
So think about it. When a train goes by, we'll have a bridge. So our river, let's say it's a bridge, 40-foot bridge. We'll have a predictable thing. We have the Coast Guard has our back and stuff, right? So we know when the openings will be. It'll actually create a lot more. You'll still have to stop for the other bridges, but it'll create a lot more benefits to get to those other bridges quicker.
Right.
That said, when the traffic happens, I mean, again, look at how much Lauderdale's grown. Look at the construction. There's 7,000 new residents just being built in the corridor right around, you know, where our office is, right around this area along the FEC. So we have to have something for the traffic to move too. Not everyone's going to get on a bike. Not everyone's going to
Sure.
walk, right? And so they need to build the infrastructure there, whether it's an underpass or it's an overpass. Go to PGA Boulevard. I don't know if you've been up there lately. They got a mall. You know, they got Carmine's restaurant, which is wonderful. And you've got some golfers that live out there on Jupiter Island and what have you. But that's about it. But they have a flyover on PGA Boulevard already. They've had it for over a decade where you don't have to stop for the FEC tracks. So why would us, as a major metropolitan area in Palm Beach and other places, not have the same thing? It makes no sense. So that's where we need to, you know, push on the electeds. Let's get the infrastructure. Let's quit arguing about whether it's a tunnel bridge. Let's make it the best product it's going to be. If it is a bridge, let's make it iconic. Because you go in Miami and you look at how Tri-Rail goes over the river there. That's iconic at the end of the day. And there's other places in the world where bridges can be iconic also. But let's move past the arguments that we have or the reasons. If it's not economically viable, then we need to move it forward. And if that means a bridge, 40-foot bridge can work for our industry, work for the community, but we also have to solve the problems. All your people, they live in this community. When they go on calls, you know, everyone else, all the people that work in lawyers' offices and doctors' offices, let's get them the infrastructure that they need on Broward Boulevard, on Commercial Boulevard, on Sunrise Boulevard, and that means a flyover and underpass.
Agreed.
That way they don't stop for it.
How do people stay involved on this? I'm pretty sure there's not a website to centrally located to find out this information. Clearly, become a member of MISF. I think that's important, even if you're not in the marine industry.
It's $500.
It's $500, but at the end of the day, it's also the reality is probably one of your clients has a business in the marine industry, regardless of what you do. I think what are we, the 2 degrees away from Phil Purcell, not Kevin Bacon?
Yeah, exactly.
It's and I think that so finding out that information, becoming a part of the trade association. Is there anything on FDOT or City of Fort Lauderdale or reach out to your legislators and say, hey, I want a bridge and I need a solution? Because the one thing I've heard is the worst thing that can happen, the absolute worst solution, is we do nothing.
100%. Yeah, doing nothing's not an option.
Okay.
And so we employ 3 full-time lobbyists. So one on the local level, one on the state level, one on the federal level.
Okay.
And they're actively involved when we need them in different issues here to communicate to the electeds and other people how important a solution is. Again, it really didn't make a difference to us whether it was a tunnel or a bridge. We need a solution, and we need one that we can afford to pay for. That said, it seems to be leaning towards, perhaps a bridge. Let's make it the most iconic bridge. In terms of what people can do, as you just said, if you're a car dealer, if you're a lawyer, if you're a dentist, the busiest Publix in the system's on 17th Street. This also is a comment about our industry too. The busiest Total Wine is on 17th Street also. But that's a good thing, right? And so we know that when the boat show's in town, it's really important for the boat show that we get a solution on the river also. So here's an economic driver that delivers $1.8 billion economic benefit to the state, does over $800 million of direct sales over 5 days, and supports this $18.5 billion industry that we all work in, of which 9.8 of that $18.5 billion between Palm Beach and Miami, 9.8 of it's in Broward County. So
Wow.
the bulk of it's in Broward County.
And how many jobs?
Over 100,000 jobs. 142 regionally, about 120 just in Broward.
Just in Broward County
Just in
alone.
Broward, yeah. I mean, you look at your employee ranks and stuff, and look
Yeah.
how you guys have grown. And you think of the changes up the river with different people that we've known for years that have either left this world or sold, and now new companies and new visions have come in, and they're putting the CapEx required that we need, and they're assembling for the future at the end of the day. Now, Marina Company was just acquired by a private equity group again, paid record price, right, for $5.4 billion. 2 of the acquisitions were about $700 million in 2 years ago, meaning LMC and Rybovich. They were about $700 million of cost. I assume that they traded at a higher dollar amount than that $5.4 billion at the end of the day. So it shows you how important our industry is.
Absolutely.
But yeah, if they get involved in the association, that would be great. It's a member-driven association. You've been around at Christie forever. It's a great association. It's well-funded. It's always had the community benefit also at heart too, not just the industry. Obviously, the industry is the driver, but the community is important too. You want where your people are going to work to be viable. So we got behind the parks bond. We got behind the police bond. New police station. The police station used to be driven with mold and stuff. So the police actually during hurricanes would evacuate when the police were leaving their own police station. So now they got a brand new station. The parks, everyone wants to see greenery in parks and things like that. So even where our offices are, we can walk over to Broward County. We can walk over to wherever the new city hall is, where they're planning it in the old city hall place for the Fort Lauderdale. And it's really important that our industry is respected in a thoughtful way, because I think our industry is so viable to this community and South Florida as a whole. When you look at the entrepreneurs that are bringing their boats here and stuff, and you think of the Huizinga family, and you think of the Moran family, Southeast Toyota, they were big boaters. Who built more Fed ships than Jim Moran? Nobody. When you look at his Huizinga family, again, great. The community's been great benefactors of that, whether it was through the Dolphins, through the Marlins, through the Panthers. And so they brought sports here, they brought businesses here, AutoNation, all these different things, but they love boats. So now you look at all the other entrepreneurs that have moved here, that have boats here, that are keeping them here. So, Zuckerberg, his boats pass through Launchpad. Bezos' boat passes through here. David McNeil from WeatherTech, he has a residence here, keeps his boat here. Those are the people we can engage from the soft side of life, too, to get involved in our community from a philanthropic side. Because there's a lot of needs here that philanthropy help with, and our industry is shouldered up with all those people because we service their boats.
Well, I think one thing that's always been important to you and a priority is also that the marine industry be a part of the community and be a part of the solutions in that community. So you brought up Habitat for Humanity, that we've been involved in some of those builds, even the neighborhood corporate build, the Broward Alliance, making sure that I can remember a time, and I'm looking over at patients here. That's okay. I'm just going to reference you on the camera. I can remember.
We've got thousands of people out here in the
There's
audience.
thousands, yeah. I had him turn down the applause
appreciate
thing,
that.
because it can be distracting. That I can remember on the front of the Broward Alliance annual report, it was aviation, it was tourism, and marine was missing. That never happens again anymore, because I believe that people have really started paying attention to that. Some of the things that you've done on the top listings in the Marine and the Business Journal.
Yeah, South
Florida Business Journal, and making sure that the companies, and showing, again, trying to portray the marine industry so much more as an industry versus a lifestyle. And we talk about that a lot because so many people get caught up in the lifestyle that our industry portrays, but we are an industry. We have businesses. And for me, without an association that's protecting and helping me understand that there will be a push for a bridge, how could I be in business for 75 years? And I'm not the only company.
100%.
You know, my neighbors, Frank and Jimmy's, you know, and Jimmy's been on this, have been in business 76 years, you know, and you look at a lot of the businesses that make up this yachting capital of the world are family businesses, and we couldn't do that without the support and all of our legislators understanding our industry. So
100%. And so the team at the Marine Industry Association is a wonderful team. Faces change over the years, but again, as long as the mission stays the same,
Agreed.
That's the most important thing. And I really believe that we are really good stewards and leaders in this community, and that's important to be respected. It's one thing to be liked. You know, leadership's not a popularity contest at the end of the day.
That's true.
You know, I like being liked, but more importantly, let's be effective. And sometimes, just like with Tunnel Bridge, I'm sure there's some people that are ruffled if it goes one way or the other, but we need a solution, and that's what we're advocating for.
Is there any kind of write-in? Sorry to go back to it, but I do want to close on this topic. Is there any kind of write-in? Are there comment periods? Are there, I kind of remember they were doing hearings. We keep referring to a they, but I'm not sure who it was. I think it's FDOT or the MPO.
They'll do all that.
But is that something that people should be encouraged? I know I had FDOT come out to my company in the neighborhood because they were talking about what the infrastructure will do. And there's also a walking path that's going to run along this corridor.
Bike path,
and to be honest, you know, I'd rather know what's going on. But I mean, it was all very well explained, whether it was a 20-foot or a 40-foot. It was actually more intrusive if it was going to be the tunnel. But I'm still okay with that if that's what the money was there for, and it's going to be for the long term of our industry. But there will be town hall meetings. There will be comments that people need to make, and there'll be a call to action, or is it?
Yeah, there'll be all those things. So
Good.
as they go through the PD&E, all those things will happen again.
Okay.
And so we need to be there and have a positive voice. It doesn't have to be 1,000 people. It just needs to be thoughtful. It needs to be
Correct.
On point, you know, at the end of the day. On point about the jobs that it creates, on point of protecting the jobs, on point in the importance of our industry, and that we live in the 6th largest metropolitan area. And the only
Correct.
thing we're missing, we wouldn't even be having this conversation if it wasn't for infrastructure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for all that you
Thank
do,
you.
and thank you on
Likewise.
behalf of the Marine Industries Association, and we appreciate you being our strongest advocate out there.
Appreciate it, Christy.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for everything.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us this season on Season 3 of the Ward's Way podcast. Be sure you subscribe because there's much more to come.